Sparks that I don't remember. Hold and let it shine. Fix and start to fade away. Fix and start to fade away. Fix and start to fade away.
Hello, dear friends of Kabbalah International. We are once again with Mario Saban.
Shalom, Nacho. How are you?
Hello, Mario. It's great to see you're doing well. Today, we'll be discussing social and family pressures, specifically focusing on their placement in the Kabbalistic perspective. According to Kabbalah, these pressures can be associated with the sefirot of Yesod, which encompasses our social relationships. Additionally, they can also be found in the Yesod and Tiferet relationships within the sephirotic structure.
Totally agree. It's challenging to address such an extensive topic in such short dialogues. But I believe this topic offers much depth because there are various types of family and social pressure. Not all pressures are the same. Moreover, in more closed groups, undoubtedly, there is much more pressure. I would start by organizing ourselves by which is the archetype of Yesod, which is the patriarch Joseph, son of Jacob and Rachel. And notice that I often say that in the Torah we should make a family constellation, because Joseph is Rachel's son and Rachel was Jacob's favorite, so Jacob preferred Rachel's sons, Benjamin and Yosef. This means that here we already have a significant conditioning factor of Yosef regarding the foam of the ego, how Yosef's ego rises because Yesod is also the ego, whether uncontrolled or controlled. And notice what level of family conditioning Yosef has, that he and Benjamin are the sons of Jacob's favorite wife. From this point on, the whole story changes, because being the preferred sons, Yosef presents himself to his brothers with pride, in front of them, when he tells them, "My father gave me this mantle of colors in front of the white mantle." And then came the brothers' envy. They threw it into the well, and we know a little of the story. But basically, what we have here is a being out of control in his egoic pride. Because in actuality, his father is the one who prompts this, and the entire narrative is influenced by Jacob's favoritism towards Rachel rather than his other three wives. So, here we already have something very interesting. The sons are marked by which one is the father's favorite or not favorite. The father prefers some sons over others. So Yosef's pride is framed in a clear family conditioning. It means that in that family structure, Yosef was an uncontrolled ego, arrogant, because the father had placed him in this position. When Yosef leaves the family framework, he begins his development of searching for his inner self. He begins to try to connect with his neshama, with his true soul. And when he comes to connect with his true soul, the superficial inertia takes him to different levels of power until he becomes, as we know, the viceroy of Egypt. But notice now that Yosef has a new situation with his identity. On the one hand, he was an Israelite in his hidden identity and an Egyptian in his revealed identity. Then he finds that by working on himself internally, he reached a very high level, but that his interiority remains repressed because the Egyptians consider him an Egyptian. They do not know that he is an Israelite until the family returns. So Yosef is the prototype of the two rectifications in Yesod. To know who he is, he has to leave the family. In order to discover his true identity, he must reconcile with his family. It is a very interesting situation for Yosef. He has to leave to know who he is. And when he leaves, he also loses himself in that Egyptian mentality. And he loses who he is again. In other words, Yosef loses himself twice in his identity. The first identity given by the egoic pride that Jacob is a problem for him because he cannot connect with his essence. So he leaves the family, or they leave him from the family, because in reality, they throw him into the well, and then he arrives in Egypt. But in Egypt, he assumes a superficial identity that is not his inner identity either, because his inner identity also corresponds to the framework of the family. And the family returns to Egypt, and we see in the Torah text, has two attitudes. First, an attitude of a certain psychological vengeance towards the brothers, because he tells them, well, bring me the younger brother. Well, but my father is going to suffer. There's a part of Yosef's story where you don't really know how it's going to end, where there is a psychological manipulation, where he, as an Egyptian, realizes he has power, but then he realizes that everyone is an instrument of divinity, that he is an instrument of divinity, and that the family is also an instrument of divinity. That's when he realizes and repositions himself, not believing in the power he has now. Because when you were arrogant, I threw a well at you. And now that I put you in this situation of power, I can throw you back into the well. And I believe that Yosef reflects there and says, no, this power was given to me by the divinity, it was given to me by God, therefore I cannot believe that I am the one who holds the power. And so he reconciles with his family. He reconciles with his family from a rectification that he makes. Therefore, we have here in Yosef a double rectification. He rectifies the ego. When he has the whole process from the well to being viceroy of Egypt. But the proof, if he rectified the ego, is how he receives the family. If he had exercised all the power, he would have killed them in revenge. And if the proof of Yosef's rectification was embrace his family as he did and reconcile with his family, setting aside the imbalances, because he also saw that his brothers had abandoned the imbalance they had. In other words, there was two vectors. He worked out his imbalances. And also the brothers in their humility. They also told him the suffering that they had and the repentance that they had. And it's there where the story ends in a certain way. In a heroic way, I would say, because Yosef is the one I like. Is the one that I like, because he is the one who wins his own uncontrolled ego.
Yes.
And somehow finds humility in everything. That is, he is a man who clearly perceives humility, and he also reconciles with his origins, ceasing to live a double life between the outward Egyptian and the Israelite he was. That is, now as the viceroy of Egypt, he could openly declare his Israelite origin. In that position of power, he could now shed the disguise of being Egyptian. Therefore, I would say that the story of Joseph is very interesting because it demonstrates how Joseph's soul was able to achieve, to get away from family conditioning, first from the family, and then from the social conditioning of Egypt. He is the hero of being able to get out of his conditioning. He achieves a total return to his neshama.
In short way, what you were talking about was that process of balance in the dimension of Yesod, product of the work that Yosef does in his process. But then I kept thinking in relation to a kind of inflection point with respect to that rectification process, that I link it to a contact with the divine that has to do with where his status changes. And his status changes from the interpretation that he makes of the dreams of the people who are in prison, because from there he is taken out and taken to another place. That is to say that there is a divine element, there is a mysterious element that takes him out of that position.
I would add something that seems important to me, which are two symbols. The dreams in the tree of life belong to Jojma, and Jojma is the symbol of the Father. Therefore, Yosef is symbolically reconciled with the Father through dreams. And the second is that when he embraces his inner self of Israel, Tiferet has as an archetype in the tree of life Jacob, his father. It means that when his father comes with his brothers and his father gets excited saying, I got my son back, Yesod and Tiferet embrace. He embraces his Tiferet by embracing the Father and embraces him. The Father symbolically is always present. He connects through the dreams in Jojma and is actually reconciled when they physically embrace the Tiferet. It is an ascension of the Yesod to the higher levels. And beware that from reconciling with Tiferet, he has a great humility of non-retaliation. He reaches Keter because he says we are all instruments of God. When he says this to his brothers, the brothers say to him, "Forgive us for what we did to you." He answers them, "No, it had to be this way. The plan was this, because the plan comes from above, and there is an acknowledgement to Keter." That is, Yosef starts in Egypt, which is pure Malchut, and Yesod, who is a black who has it out of control, goes up to the Tiferet and reconciles and says we are instruments of Keter. He goes through the whole midline. It is impressive what Yosef does.
Excellent, Mario. Thank you.
A hug.